Jeremy, we've come to the Church of All Nations, which sits on the traditional site of the Garden of Gethsemane on the eastern side of Jerusalem.
Now, obviously it's closed. It's dark, we're not gonna be able to get in. And it looks a lot different than it would have when Jesus was here. We've got modern city streets, cars, lights, but if we can imagine what that would have been like after Jesus' final Passover meal with the disciples. They have sung their songs, Jesus has prayed for them, as recorded over in John, and then they come up here for Jesus to pray multiple times. What's one of the reasons that coming out at night is so important, especially looking back to Jerusalem?
Well, understanding that when Jesus and his disciples were here, it would have been dark. They didn't have the lights that we have today. They would have been able to see the walls of Jerusalem, and they would have been able to see the gates. And John tells us about the army coming out with their lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus would have been able to see that from here.
Now that's really heightened by this dark atmosphere. It's going to be great to get in there and see what that looked like.
We'll do that tomorrow.
Jesus had the reputation of going to that spot, to that garden to pray. And he knew what was happening that night. During the Passover meal, he actually sent Judas out to do what he was going to do. For anybody else, if they knew what was going on, they would have gone to an alternate spot. They would have gone to a spot that was different than the routine to be safe and to keep themselves from harm. But Jesus didn't vary his routine. He still went through with where he normally went, knowing that that's where Judas would find him. I was a little disappointed we couldn't get into the Garden of Gethsemane at night. I understand why, but it's exciting to go back.
Yeah, they had a special prayer service going on. Being there in the daytime, we'll have even a better perspective. We'll be able to see things even clearer than we did last night.
It's such an emotional place. I mean, Jesus was so vulnerable when he was in the garden praying the night that he was arrested. I don't even know how to anticipate what that's going to be like to be there.
Jeremy, we've entered the courtyard of the Church of All Nations, which sits on the traditional location of the Garden of Gethsemane. This building was built in the 1920s, and it was built on top of the foundations of a 4th century Byzantine chapel and a 12th century Crusader basilica. In the 1st century, there was an oil press here. Of course, in Aramaic, the word Gethsemane means oil press. During the time of Jesus, this would have been the area where they would have crushed all of the olives that come from the olive trees from what we know as the Mount of Olives.
There's some cultural ideas about the various numbers of olive pressings. You'd put the olives in and you'd press it, and the first pressing went to this, and the second pressing went to this, and the third pressing would be used for this. And so the fact that Jesus was in an area known for its olive press, and that he prays and pours himself out under intense pressure 3 different times is very significant.
This was a place where he was known to go to for just some solitude. And so this is a place where on the night he was betrayed, he felt it was a good place for him to go and talk to his Father, and he carried some of the disciples there with him.
To be able to walk into a grove of olive trees, especially one as old as the one that we went to, is really special.
That whole area is really only about the size of half of a football field. If the church building or the olive trees aren't sitting in the exact location, it's very close.
Jesus prayed all through his life. Prayer was something special for him. He set aside time to make sure to communicate with the Father. This night was especially significant for him. It's just before his betrayal. It's just before his arrest. He comes here to pray 3 times to ask God if there's any way possible that he could avoid the cross and everything that went along with the cross. The Gospels tell us that Jesus prayed, that he had a habit of praying, that he would go off by himself to pray. But it's not very often that the Gospels give us the words of his prayers. And so to have those words on the eve of such a momentous day is really, really special. And then to understand that it was several times that he offered a very similar prayer. That's how intent he was on it. And the answer was given to him with the light of the torches coming down. The answer was no, this is the way. And he submitted himself to God's will.